Hi, everyone. I thought I would record this to basically show you the part of the North Carolina Standards for School Executives that is that deals with the competencies. It's toward the end, but you have to understand the competencies are individual, 21 individual skills that are expected throughout the practices of the standards, the leadership styles and things of, or the leadership types that are described in the standards. So let's just start by basically, you have a paragraph here on the left that explains what they are. And they're not directly aligned with anything because there has to be flexibility, but these are more, they're less ingrained in the standards. They're not going to be detailed and mentioned, even though it's inferred that you're going to need them to in the practices and the creation of artifacts that you'll need for to demonstrate the standard. But they are part of you as a leader. Now, it doesn't mean that you individually as a leader have to possess all of these standards. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, your ability to create a leadership team to facilitate the needs of that particular task is you're going to be how you're evaluated as a leader. So don't think, oh my gosh, there's no way I can be strong in all these. That's right, but there's a way you need to know how to get strong in all these, and that's the difference. Okay, starting, I just had to scroll down here. Starting at the very bottom, see down here, communication. Notice it has listening as the first characteristic. Clearly and effectively presents and understands information orally and writing. Acquires, organizes, and analyzes, interprets, maintains information needed to achieve school or team 21st century objectives. Be clear, be succinct, be consistent in that area. Change management. Effectively engages staff and community in the change process. Now, this is an area, if you'll read those, take a look at the first few things, the words like urgency, and we do need educational leaders who come in to change. I know you're going to be working with people, you're going to be referring to experiences that are based on your experience, and the way things are and have been. But we also have to involve a little bit of innovative creative thinking, and I'll get into creative thinking in just a minute. But you have to be able to reinvent yourself and take a look at schools. And one of the things that I do as a professor is constantly challenge you to question things that are no longer questioned. Okay, conflict management. You want to be able to resolve conflicts, disagreements, or complaints in a constructive manner. That could be a whole course, so I'm not going to try to summarize it any other than just to tell you that there will be conflict in a school. Now, one of the things that we are going to talk about later is one of the things that you'll have questions about is micro-political leadership, which is basically organizing and managing a large group of people with different, different personalities, different objectives, different jobs, different roles in the school, and try to turn them into a harmonious group, sharing the vision and contributing to the positive culture of the school. So you can sort of see that conflict management would be part of that. Creative thinking, once again, that's thinking outside the box. There's not a recipe. There's not a 5-step process into becoming a leader. I think, and a lot of times I think of creative thinking, I think of anticipating, I think of being proactive, and also think of interesting solutions where you have a larger percentage of people who are satisfied at the end of the day. Customer focus. The basic thing is a lot of times we think of the students in our school is I'm not trying to tell you too much and get you too much of a focus here, but we're working for the students and we're working for them as young adults. When they become adults, if they were to come up to you and look you in the eye and tell you what they thought of what you did for them, that's the person we're working for. So always remember who the focus is. And sometimes we think that the students are there to work for us, and or we work for the parents. Really, we work for our client is the student. Delegation. This is very important, and it's also a weakness in a lot of young administrators. Remember, if you can't be strong in all these areas and you have to get strong, then you also need to know how to delegate. Delegation as a principal will be something where you're judged quite a bit by the staff and faculty there, because how you delegate needs to be done consistently and fairly. One of the biggest problems that I've seen where you have risks in the micro political leadership of a school is when that problems arise when the school workhorses, the ones who do seem like they do everything, are getting upset because there's some who aren't given many responsibilities, probably because they're weak or the principal knows they won't get the result they need out of them. But bottom line is everybody in the school is getting paid on the same scale, and they will remind you of that if that comes up. Dialogue, inquiry. You want free flow communication and people being able to ask questions. You want to know about problems and not avoid them. So open up those lines. Emotional intelligence. This is kind of important because this is more internal. It's the ability to manage oneself through self-awareness and self-management is it's one of the social emotional type skills that you need, and you want to have a strong social emotional element in your school. You want to build relationships, and you want them to be based on things that are positive and quality forms of communication to benefit the overall good of the school. Okay, be aware of the environment. External and internal trends is what they call it. So you have to sort of pay attention and observe. When you're in the cafeteria, you're observing. If you see, look for patterns. Look for the, like I said, if some of these other things break down, like for dialogue inquiry, if that breaks down, and that usually is indicative that there's a problem, or there's somebody has a problem with you and they're not comfortable talking to you about it. Try to eliminate those barriers and see if you can maintain positive. And like I said, it says policies, practices, procedures, and positions, the 4 Ps. Okay, and then of course, the global perspective. We are obviously, most of our federal government assistance requires more of a global economy, and usually economy and military are the 2 reasons that the federal government has an interest in schools. At least that's been the historical past. About when they've had innovative reform like the GI Bill and how Sputnik involved the enhanced improvements in math and science, and et cetera. So be aware of what's going on globally. There's a lot of things that we are, because we are a world leader, so to speak. We do tend to view ourselves, and we know less about other countries and other customs, cultures, than a lot of countries. Like, for example, in Europe, they know a lot more about America than we know about them, and it's kind of a blind spot for us. It limits our thinking, it limits our creativity, it limits our awareness of what's going on in the world. Okay, judgment. This is important because one of the things I personally do when having to make a decision is I go back to some of the other skills, the communication skills and the dialogue inquiry skills, and I try to listen to everyone in the room and understand their concern. And I try not to make any decisions. I try not to label a person who comes to me with a problem because they've been there 3 times the week before with a problem. I try not to stereotype or anything like that. So I want to listen to everybody in the room, and ultimately at the end of that process, then I will make a decision without being rushed or without feeling rushed or pressured, so that I serve the best interests of the student and our ability to serve that student. Um, Organizational ability. This is the one thing that's really going to be really comes into focus very quickly when you assume an administrator role. You know, you have things like schedules, you have agendas, you have observations appointments, you have meetings, and you want to be out in that school and you want to be a part. You want to know what everybody's doing so that you can drop in and be a part of something that you think is important. Not showing up to a lot of faculty, a lot of staffers means that you just don't care. And it may not be the case that you don't care, but it may mean that sends the signal that you don't. So I want to make sure that when I have a grade level meeting, that I try to show up once every week or two. And I want to make sure, pop in, say something, look at their agendas. And if I can't be there, then I want the leader of that particular PLC or group or whatever to come to me and talk to me for about 5 minutes, show me the agenda, tell me what was discussed, so that I can stay abreast of what's going on. Another thing is you got to keep the negative energy out of your office, the dealing with the problems all the time, so that you can get out and be positive. So that's organization has a lot to do with that. Okay, and personal ethics and values. To understand, there are situations where where we all challenged to our ethics or values are challenged. Understand who you are and what you are, so that you are making decisions. Then you can understand that your input in that process. Also want to model high ethics and values and integrity. And I want to try to be fair, and I want to, obviously, and in one of the biggest areas, notice the last word, there's confidentiality. I don't know how many times I walked into a teacher's lounge and I hear confidentiality being broken. If somebody doesn't have a need to know that information, you should not be telling them about a student or the case or what their grades are or what their situation was or anything like that. And I hear it all the time, even talking from one grade level to another grade level, targeting and marking a student who was a problem for them, and that sort of thing. It creates an expectation for that student that's not very fair. So a lot of our ethics have influence our decisions and our treatment of people and situations. So we need to be aware of them. Okay, and proactively, a personal responsibility for performance. You want to proactively and continuously improve performance by focusing on the needs, areas of improvement, enhancement of all strengths. Of course, we're constantly going through a reflection process. We want everyone to be less sensitive about their performance. I gave a teacher an evaluation one time, and she didn't make, at the time, the highest level was a 4. She didn't make all 4s, and she got really upset about it. And I said, well, she says, well, I've always made all 4s. And I said, well, you didn't today. Today you weren't all 4s. Maybe I caught you at a bad day. Maybe next time you won't. But nobody is perfect all the time. And if you think you are, then that goes back to, some things that we need to do a better job reflecting, and we need to spend as much time focused on our strength as we do our weaknesses. And nobody, like I said, I'll be fair, and over time, those averages will. If you are a perfect teacher, eventually those numbers will catch up to you. But the reality of the situation is, whoever the observer was before me probably didn't want to put up with all the drama, so gave them all 4s to shut them up. And that's not fair to the teacher. The teacher's not going to improve if you do that, if they think that what they're doing is perfect. Okay, responsiveness. That's another thing. Sometimes you'll get bombarded. Sometimes you'll have tons of deadlines at central office, and you'll be working on that stuff, and then all of a sudden, have 15 needs, and teachers with issues or problems or whatever the case may be, a parent, and how quickly you get back to them. They don't know about all your agenda and all the stuff you've got to do. All they know is that they sent you an email yesterday and you still haven't responded. So be responsive. Do all you can do. If it takes all day, that's one reason why you want a solid, strong, positive culture in your school, so you don't get an avalanche of negativity bury you, so you can't get out and do things, because you got to stay ahead of it. Okay, results orientation. Sometimes a decision is not required, sometimes it is. When it is, then you need to know what to do, and know what actions you need to obtain the goals and the results that you need. Crises are big ones in this area. If you have a situation that happens in your school, you should have some pretty good idea of what needs to be done immediately. Have a checklist, have a process. If a kid were to like bring a gun to school, when do you notify parents? When do you do this? When do you do that? So you need to know all these things. Those can be critically important. And it's not just unforeseeable things either. So, but anyway, sensitivity. This sort of goes along with empathy, and you need to listen to other people, and along with sensitivity, I would say goes, things like cultural responsiveness and understanding. A lot of times we attribute normal as to what was normal for us, but we need to broaden that scope, and we need to start looking and listening and try to fully understand what it is to be in the situation the person is in. Systems thinking. Basically, the network. You need to understand the interrelationships and impact of school and district influences, as it says there. Who are the stakeholders? Now, a lot of times, what I try to do is create a culture that involves all of these. That involves external stakeholders bring them into your culture. And your culture is threaded through your assessment practices, your teaching, your instructional practices, your disciplinary practices. All these things are consistent with, building self-esteem in the child, and whole child development. And everybody in the system understands their role in whole child development. If you get into the managerial, where it becomes not about the children but the processes, then I think you can lose focus. Technology. You have to be, this is one thing they don't talk about in technology, but you also have to be aware of what are the technology, and what is the technology, the capacity of your staff, and how much technology is available to your students in their homes, and et cetera. So sometimes we can use technology, which is not a lot of bells and whistles, that looks great, but we tend to exclude, maybe in doing so, some people who don't have equal access to it. So you have to be real careful not to create an unequal playing field. We all know how great technology is, and there's something new coming out every week. And it is overwhelming and exhausting to try to keep up with it. And just because if you're really strong in technology, just don't assume everybody's as strong as you are. You have to keep it simple, and you have to keep it effective. And believe me, in that area too, in schools, everybody's trying to sell you something. So, and then of course, time management goes without saying, that you need to be an effective manager of your time. You need to, this is going to sound trivial and petty, but there's a lot of people who will try to command, 90% of your time, 5% of the people will. You have to learn how to, without making them feel unimportant or unwanted, but to walk away from that conversation, hang up that phone, and in an effective way. Or when they're in your office, you have to know how to politely move them on. Now, that's just one example of time management, but it's easy to have a schedule, and then you allow others to determine what that schedule is going to be. Then you might not as well have one. Okay, and visionary. Obviously, we want everybody sharing our vision. So you've got to promote, model, and repeat that vision whenever whenever at all times to keep everybody heading in the right direction. Okay, those are your competencies. Now we're going to do an activity. Sorry for the length of that, but I wanted to be able to show you this visual straight from the document. Thank you, and I'll give it back to me to give the assignment.